Hi, I'm Loredana Hager. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm going to show you today how to make a wonderful, very simple recipe. And if I were to call this Italian Cooking 101, this would probably be one of the first recipes that I would teach you how to make. This is what we call in our family salsa semplice. Salsa means sauce, semplice means simple or plain. Salsa usually refers to a tomato-based kind of sauce, and this particular sauce can be used in many other dishes, such as eggplant parmesan, and I have made that recipe and you can see my video on my YouTube channel. As well, it can be used for basic sauce and you can add capers and olives. Again, I've also shown you how to make that and you can check out my YouTube channel to see how you can make that particular sauce. But this is how to start it, how to make the basic, how to create the foundation for some of these additional ingredients that you can add to it. And as I said, it can also be used in many other dishes. This is a salsa semplice versus a sauce with meat or salsa con carne or salsa di carne, where you're actually adding some type of meat to flavor it and it makes it a richer, more robust taste. And I will also be making a video on that you can check out so you can learn how to make these two basic sauces. I have here in front of me the main ingredients that are needed for this recipe. Of course, as the French would say, pièce de résistance are the tomatoes. You have two choices. I have been blessed to have a wonderful garden and been blessed with a very, very talented gardener, my husband, who is growing these type of tomatoes. These are called San Marzano. As you can see the shape, it's almost like a teardrop, and this is what it looks like on the inside. I like these type of tomatoes because have a lot of pulp. They are not very watery. And so when you're using these to make a sauce, it cooks much faster and you get a more creamy, a more dense type of sauce that you can use in many dishes. So I have here some of the harvested tomatoes cut up in pieces, and I'll show you how we'll get to these later using this food mill. If you don't have the opportunity to get fresh tomatoes, either that they're homegrown or that you buy them at a market, you can get the equivalent of these tomatoes in a can. These are canned tomatoes, but this is exactly the same type of tomato. As you can see, these are San Marzano, but they've added some pureed tomato, probably they've added some basil, there may be a little bit of salt. So it's always best to have fresh, but again, this is the second best option to make your sauce. What you will also need is, of course, extra virgin olive oil. And for the amount that I have here, I will probably be using a couple tablespoons of this oil today, a couple of garlic cloves, and also some salt. I have about 1/8 teaspoon. I always like to taste my sauce toward the end just to make sure that I need to add more. So I always like to go with less rather than more because once it becomes too salty, you cannot remove it. The other tool that I like to use when making the sauce is what it's called a food mill, or in Italian, passatutto, which means everything goes through. What I want to show you first is the bottom of this tool. It has little holes, and what these holes prevent this is for the seeds that are in the tomato to come through, along with holding back the peel. And I will show you in a few minutes how to use this tool. When you look on the inside, it has a mechanism. So all the tomatoes go in here, and then you just turn it, and the pure mechanism will just crush and turn them into a pulp. To make it a little easier, I've cut the tomatoes in small pieces. If you don't have a passatutto or a food mill, the alternative is using a regular food processor. What it will not prevent is the seeds. They will be there, and as well the peel. So it's not as smooth, and also aesthetically you will see the seeds from the tomato. One more thing that I do want to mention is that at times, when you cut these tomatoes, at least the fresh tomatoes, not the ones in a can, They will have this membrane in the middle. So sometimes I will take that because it's a little tough and sometimes bitter. But you may choose to leave it in there along with all the seeds uh, because once you put it through the food mill or the food processor, it will become all crushed and blended in together. So my next thing is to show you how I use the food mill to turn all of these wonderful fresh tomatoes into a pureed tomato base that we then will cook on the stove. I have here the food mill or pasatutto that I showed earlier, and I placed it on top of a pot. So this is where all the tomatoes that will go through the food mill, they will go down here. I like to do this so I have it already pureed to throw in the pot that will have had the olive oil and the garlic. But I wanted to take a few minutes to show you the mechanism of the food mill and how I prepare the tomatoes to make it a little easier on your shoulders, unless you really want to have a good workout. So I've taken the tomatoes, the San Marzano that I showed you earlier. These are in half. They've been cut up in smaller pieces. So I'm going to put a few at a time inside. Don't overload it because it could overflow, and also it's harder to turn and to smash up basically all these tomatoes. So I'm going to put this down. And as you see, it has a couple of hooks, kind of an anchor. Sometimes, depending on the size of the pot, you may have to hold it if it doesn't fit. I sometimes like to lift it in place and to hold it this way. Sometimes when the tomato seems to be kind of getting stuck or lumped to one corner, I like to use a spoon and just move it around. And sometimes going in the opposite direction will also release that. What you want to do before you continue adding more tomatoes is that you're going to have to clear the bottom, or at least some of the sauce that is coming through, so that more can come out without hindrance. I think I'm finished. All the tomatoes have been added and gone through the food mill. I just want to show you what this wonderful tool does. It has left behind all the peel, which is kind of tough, as well as all these little tiny seeds, which unfortunately the food processors will not do. But again, if you have it or if you can find one, wonderful. This is the sauce. Of course, it's uncooked, but that's how it looks already. And you can tell, as I mentioned earlier, the richness and the pulp of these tomatoes, that it's liquid, definitely, and it's going to have to be reduced as you cook it. But there's already so much pulp in it that there's not going to be much of that happening or needing to cook it for a long, long time. So now that we have this ready, come with me to the stove where I'm going to show you the first step that we need to do before we add this tomato sauce. I have here a pot where I've added 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and I've added the 2 garlic cloves. They've been slightly smashed with a large knife. I want basically to flavor the oil, so I'm going to be taking them out. As you can see, they're starting to turn golden brown, so it's time to take them out. Otherwise, it will burn and it will not be very tasty for the sauce. So again, it's just to flavor the olive oil. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to turn this off for a minute because I don't want to splash myself. Remember all the sauce that we put through the food mill? I'm going to be adding that to this pot slowly. The color is just beautiful, this wonderful, vibrant red. I'll be turning on the flame again, and I will want this to boil and then lower the temperature so that it will simmer. I'm going to add the salt. I had about 1/8 of a tablespoon of salt. And we'll also add some fresh basil. I'll add a couple of leaves this will just be adding additional flavor to your sauce. Actually, I think I said 1/8 of a tablespoon. It should be 1/8 of a teaspoon. Definitely don't want to make it that salty. And usually what I like to do, as you can see, there is that liquid that's going to have to be reduced and become thicker. I like to keep it to a small amount, and then I taste the sauce at the end to see if I need to add more salt. So it's 1/8 of a teaspoon. So we'll wait this till it boils. Then you want to simmer it, and we'll let it cook it down, and we'll check afterwards, after it starts simmering, for about 30 minutes or so. So we'll be back in a little while. I put a lid on the pot so that it would come to a boil, so I wanted to show you. So as it comes to a boil, then you want to lower the flame, and I'm going to put it on low so that it'll continue simmering. You may want to have it partially covered to let some of the steam come out, and to stir it on occasion. But you can leave it for about 30-35 minutes, and then you can check to see, and I will show you later, the consistency and the thickness that I like. So it all depends really on your flame and really how much tomato you're using, and whether it's fresh tomatoes or the canned tomatoes. The fresh tomatoes will tend to have a little more liquid because I mentioned earlier the ones in the can, they've added tomato puree, so it already thickens it. So it's really eyeballing it and feeling it with the spoon to see how thick it is. So we'll give it a while and make sure that it's no longer boiling, as I mentioned. Keep the flame low, and we'll be back, and I'll show you later what it's supposed to look like. I checked on the sauce about 30 minutes after it had been on the stove, and it wasn't quite ready, so I let it cook down a little further for another 20 minutes. I just turned off the flame. I want to show you what it looks like, or how I like the consistency to be. As you can see, it's really, really thick. When I pick it up with the wooden spoon, it's really very thick and not runny at all. It's just a wonderful, wonderful, smooth, homogeneous sauce. Now, I've mentioned that I like to always taste it for salt. So I'm going to give it a try. But I thought that perhaps one way to test it for salt was to put it on a little piece of bread. Let me tell you a little bit about the story about this. I remember as a child growing up, when my mom would make some sauce at home, and there would be some wonderful bread. It may have been even a day old. It was bought fresh every day. I would have a slice of bread and just put some of this tomato sauce and have a wonderful, wonderful slice of bread with it. It was the best healthy snack ever. What did I know as a child? I just liked the taste, and I still do to this day. So I think I'm going to give it a try to find out what it tastes like, if it has enough salt, and perhaps maybe jot down some childhood memories as I do this all over again. So I'm going to put some of this on this bread. By the way, this is homemade bread that my husband has made. So I'm going to put a little more. It's still a little hot, so I apologize for blowing on it. I don't want to burn my lips or tongue. Here it goes. Delicioso. It does need a little bit of salt, so I'm going to go ahead and do that before I put this away. So I'm just going to add maybe about another 1/8 of a teaspoon, not a tablespoon. I'm glad I didn't do that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be hearing me saying delicioso. It would be, ooh, this needs to be thrown away. So I just added a little more. I'm stirring it in well. I'm going to let it cool, and then I will store it away, and to be used for many other recipes that I'm looking forward to sharing with you in the months to come. Buon appetito!